The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron, well, they've been seen embracing and holding hands, a little touch of the back at the Coalition of the Willing summit in Paris today. Yes, you heard that right. Hugging and hand-holding. Now, I don't know about you, but I find this display rather odd for two leaders supposedly focused on hard-nosed diplomacy and security in the face of Russian aggression. Hi, I'm Emily Carver, and this is GBN Originals. Let's start with the optics then. Keir Starmer and Monsieur Macron, two men leading their nations during a time of geopolitical tension, were seen engaging in what could only be described as an unusually warm display of camaraderie. Is this the new face of diplomacy? Are we now solving international crises with hugs and handholds and kisses? Certainly a departure from the Churchillian image of grit and determination we usually associate with British leadership. One might wonder whether this is all an attempt to project unity, or is it simply a theatrical gesture for the cameras? After all, Macron is no stranger to dramatic displays. Remember his infamous handshake battles with Donald Trump. But for Keir Starmer, this does feel all a little awkward and out of character, doesn't it? It does appear as though he's allowing the French president to lead him. Now, the Labour leader has spent years trying to shake off perceptions of being soft on foreign policy, not least because of Jeremy Corbyn. So why now? Why this sudden pivot to public displays of affection with Macron? Well, moving beyond the theatrics, let's talk about the summit a bit itself. The Coalition of the Willing, as it's been called, met to discuss Ukraine's security and, of course, Europe's response to Russian aggression. Well, on paper, it sounds quite promising, doesn't it? 30 leaders coming together to hash out plans for peacekeeping forces and strategies to enforce a potential ceasefire agreement between Moscow and Kyiv. But the outcomes seem far from groundbreaking. Sure, there was talk of excellent progress in military planning and Europe mobilizing together in pursuit of peace. Yet Russia remains defiant, refusing to accept ceasefire terms unless sanctions are lifted. And that's not going to happen. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer accused Vladimir Putin of playing games with naval ceasefire agreements in the Black Sea. Strong words indeed, but will they translate into action? Now, while Macron and Starmer may be holding hands and hugging and saying sweet nothings to each other in Paris, cracks within Europe are hard to ignore. The summit highlighted tensions between nations trying to balance their commitments to Ukraine with domestic pressures. And let's not forget that some key players like the United States of America weren't even fully on board with previous agreements. This rather raises questions about whether Europe truly has a coherent strategy for dealing with Russia. Are we seeing genuine collaboration here, or just a patchwork coalition held together by photo ops and lofty rhetoric? Is this all for show? Is there any substance behind these types of meetings? Well, let's turn our attention back to Emmanuel Macron. The French president has long positioned himself as Europe's de facto leader, a man who can bring nations together in times of crisis. Hosting this summit is yet another attempt to bolster his image as a global statesman. But let's remember, his track record is mixed at best, from his handling of domestic protests to his strained relationships with other EU leaders. He often seems more interested in style rather than substance. Is this summit yet another example of Macron prioritising optics over outcomes? And what does it say about Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, that he's just willing to play along with it all?
I used to have to use the razor that my ex-girlfriend used to shave her legs. It scratched me and it made me feel weird. But fear not, because Manscaped is back with a game changer. This isn't just any old shaver. We're talking about the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver with two interchangeable skin-safe blade heads. One for that baby smooth look and another when you want to keep it a bit rugged. Get this, it's waterproof. You can use it in the shower, by the pool, or even while scuba diving if that's your thing. This beauty runs for 75 minutes on a single charge. That's enough time to shave your face, your mate's face, and still have juice left over for touch-ups. You'll also get their Power Shave Gel for a proper wet shave experience, and a face shave soother to keep your mug looking fresh and irritation-free. It's like having a barber in your bathroom, minus the awkward small talk. Click the link in the description and use the code GBN for a whopping 20% off and free shipping with the code GBN at manscaped.com. Join the 11 million blokes worldwide who trust Manscaped. Your face will thank you, and so will your wallet.
And let's not forget, Keir Starmer is walking a tightrope here. His government faces huge criticism at home over the handling of economic issues and public services, cutting benefits, cutting growth, not cutting inflation. Can he afford to invest so much political capital in foreign policy when voters are demanding action closer to home? That's a question for you. Finally, let's consider what all this means for Britain. The Coalition of the Willing may sound impressive, but will it deliver tangible results for Ukraine? Or is it just another diplomatic talking shop? At the end of the day, is it more about the negotiations going on in Riyadh, where the United States are involved? And how does Britain benefit from aligning so closely with Macron's vision for Europe? Well, Keir Starmer must tread carefully here. While cooperation with France is important, Britain cannot afford to be seen as merely following Macron's lead. We cannot be Macron's puppy. Our nation has its own interests and priorities, and those must come first.
Chris Hope, GBNews. Prime Minister, Russia's today warning of a direct conflict with NATO if your coalition, the willing, puts troops on the ground in Ukraine. Will you give MPs a vote on your plans before that happens? And if I can quickly ask about the spring statement yesterday, you told us that we'll be £500 better off from the spring statement, but just next week, energy bills go up, council tax bills go up, water bills, broadband bills, TV licence, rail fares go up, plus national insurance for employers, plus fees of income tax thresholds. £500 won't touch the sides of what's facing your voters next week. Are you gaslighting them? And what's your message to them about the cost of living crisis?
Let me take I think ended up being three parts of your question, Chris, but fair enough. Look, in terms of what Russia says, we know what Russia wants. It wants a defenceless Ukraine. So it doesn't surprise me that Russia's saying their position is Ukraine shouldn't have any capability of its own or any assistance or help from anybody else. That rather gives away their opening stance on this, and that can't guide us in our response. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves with a vote because we're not at that stage. We are at the stage of turning the political momentum into operational plans, looking at the various options, and then going for the next piece of work with the Chiefs of Defence. But you know my long-standing position, which is if we were to deploy in any scenario on a long-term basis, then of course Parliament should have a say in that, and I don't deflect from that. Look, on the people being £500 better off, it's not me saying that, it's the OBR. And that is really important because we said that we would improve living standards under a Labour government, and that is what the OBR says we are doing. And obviously their calculation takes into account other factors. That is materially different to the last 14 years. If there's one thing above all else that singles out the last 14 years under the Tory government, it's that it was the biggest downgrading and reduction in living standards in generations. So that is really important. And of course, alongside that, interest rates are coming down. If people are on mortgages, that makes a material difference. Wages are up higher than prices. So in terms of what people feel in their pockets, that's a really important measure. And of course, for those on the lowest income, that's 3 million people, they will have that hike in the minimum wage. So what we're doing is, in answer to your question, securing our economy, taking the decisions that are necessary, seeing that impacted in the OBR's assessment that people will be £500 better off, so living standards will go up, very important. But at the same time, because of the investment we made in the NHS and others, we've seen 2 million additional appointments in the NHS. We said we would do that in the first year of a Labour government. We've done it in 7 months. For 5 months, waiting lists have come down, even during the winter. So I think we can be clear that the decisions we made in the budget were the right decisions. They were tough, but they were right, and you can see now some of the effects of them.
So there you have it. A summit filled with grand gestures, some very cuddly gestures, but questionable outcomes, from hugging, hand-holding between Starmer and Macron to vague promises about European unity. One can't help but wonder whether this is all diplomacy or theatre. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. This has been Emily Carver. Don't forget to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel for more videos like this.